everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your sun in Cancer and your moon in Scorpio. So we're talking about double water. Somebody requested this. And when we're talking about the sun sign, we have to separate it from the moon because they have different goals or different expressions, might be a better way of putting it. The sun is what you aspire to be. So I don't want to say it's more worldly, because although it can be how you shine your light in the world, it can also be, there can be a soul urge coming from that based upon when you came into this lifetime, this incarnation. You might have chosen to be a Cancer individual based on some of the things that you wanted to accomplish. So there can be like a spiritual connection to that. The moon is going to be your emotional nature, and it has been called karmic. I don't know exactly why. I assume it's because some of those emotional responses could be coming from past lives, not just this lifetime, or some of those, I would even call them personality traits, not in that kind of show-offy personality aspect, but more of the reactions that you have to life that we tie into your personality. So for instance, if somebody is moody, that is part of their personality. It's not the same thing as if you're like let's say you're a sun in Leo and you're very dramatic, but kind of like fun dramatic, not like being a drama queen or anything like that. That's definitely part of your personality. If you're very extroverted and you just have a lot of pizzazz, that's part of it too. But those emotional traits also comprise your personality. And you think about the word personality, person. It's like, what is it special about that person in the way that they carry themselves, the way that they act? And your emotions do inform the way that you act. So, looking at it from the sun sign perspective, you are the consummate nurturer. Even if you're a male, you may be the kind of husband or mate who is like telling your other partner, telling your significant other that you are, have you put on warm enough clothing? Can I make you something to eat? So it has nothing to do with gender roles or anything like that. You just are a naturally nurturing person. As a matter of fact, speaking of gender roles, if you are a male, you may either fantasize about or actually do the bulk of the parenting. So even if your partner gives birth, you're there to raise the child and be like a house husband or whatever you want to call it. A stay-at-home parent is probably the best way of putting it. And you love it, and that's something that you want to do. Maybe you take over the cooking for the family, regardless. And so you can be a person who is very comfortable on the domestic scene. You'd have to look at more of the chart itself to see where the sun is located and where the moon is located, because if let's say your sun is in the 12th house, or your sun is if your sun is in the 12th house, you're going to be even more like of a hermit type of person. But what I meant to say was, let's say your sun is in the 10th house, then that is the opposite house of Cancer. That is the house of Capricorn. I'm talking about in the universal chart, which, dictates these qualities that each of these houses represents. So you may have that desire to be a career person in a big way, because the sun in the 10th house will make you very much a leader in your career. But there could be like this conflict where you're like, oh man, I really want to be at home. You will likely have children simply by being a Cancer sun sign, but then you could still want that career, is what I'm trying to say. And even for the sun sign, being a Cancer is going to make you emotional and sentimental. Sentimentality is one of those big emotions associated with Cancer. And so a person, the past, to me, I always say, like, for Cancer, the past is almost more real than their present day reality. So you may think back to childhood a lot and things like that. And by the way, I don't know if I thought that one on my own. I think I read so much that I probably got that from somebody else. But that I've noticed this is that people who are Cancers, it's very hard for them to look forward. They're much more comfortable looking in the past. And this really makes some great history teachers, because the past can come alive with a Cancerian teacher, whether it's in high school or the college level. You just are natural for that. And part of this too is that Cancer possesses the memory of an elephant. They never forget. And if your Mercury is in Cancer, this is going to even be more so the case. And so memorizing important dates, which is a really big part of being a historian, and being able to kind of dredge this up or bring this up at a moment's notice, is very important for that. And you just are natural for that. But another thing that can be very entertaining for you or fulfilling is looking at your family trees. So what do they call that? Genealogy? That might be something that's very interesting, which brings me to the moon in Scorpio. Now, the moon in Scorpio is a very difficult moon, okay, because of the strong emotions that it invokes, or is it evokes? I don't know. One of those puppies. But probably invokes. I don't know, evokes. So the point is that Scorpio rules the 8th house of the shadow self. And so especially, whether it's rage or, I was going to say despair, but that might be more, I don't think that Scorpios, deal in despair. I think Scorpio is so fierce. It's more like, vengefulness and envy and that kind of thing, jealousy, fear of abandonment. So the interesting thing about this is that for a lot of signs, I would say, oh yeah, this is really difficult. I think that a Sun in Cancer person is much better equipped to deal with this than other signs. And this is because the water element understands that emotions are what they are. They're not trying to hide from emotions. Now, that is not entirely true, because there are some water signs that are escapists and they feel things so strongly. And if the sun and or the moon is heavily afflicted, there may be a lot of emotional excess, or just a lot of problems that come about through the emotions. And this can also indicate a lot of trauma in one's past that is very hard for them to get over. But I would say, in general, there's a strong ability to identify emotions and to work through them. And also another aspect of this is having a double water sign, sun and moon. It makes it easier for the person to understand things, because there's a strong psychic link. there is a highly intuitive nature. And so an example would be if you have been the victim of abuse, which some of you may have been given the moon in Scorpio, that the sun in Cancer is not Pisces. So Cancer is not, and I'm saying that in kind of a good way, because Pisces can much more easily identify as a victim. It has a sacrificial quality to it just by the nature of what it represents. Cancer is a cardinal sign. So cardinal signs to me are very strong because they are capable and they are oriented towards taking action. So a Cancer sun sign, regardless of what moon sign, but including having the moon in Scorpio, is not going to wallow in emotions indefinitely. There's going to be the decision to do something about whatever it is that they're dealing with. And also, the empathic connection is strong here because of that sun in Cancer. And there's an understanding of human nature with this combination that can make the person not take things as personally, even though this is a very subjective combination. I think that this can make you much more able, even though you're sensitive, to see through another person's abuse and see that they were struggling. And it doesn't mean that you just excuse the abuse, but it means that you don't take it to mean that there's something wrong with you. And I think that I wouldn't necessarily say this to a Cancer person who comes from a background of abuse if they didn't have that moon in Scorpio. I'm not saying that that would be true across the board with the sun in Cancer, because Cancer people can be quite emotionally vulnerable and emotionally dependent on others, given other configurations. But Scorpio to me is a very powerful sign, and it's like the cat with 9 lives, and so Scorpio, if anything, is a survivor, an emotional survivor of whatever they have dealt with. And by the way, if you're interested in delving just specifically on your moon in Scorpio, I do have a video, and interestingly enough, it has the most hits of any of my videos that I've ever put out. And I notice that I get quite a good for me, a good view rate with anything that is scorpionic, whether it's the moon, the sun, a context to Pluto, those kinds of things. And I have those myself. Sun in the 8th house, moon in conjunction with Pluto, even being a sun in Sagittarian. And I realize that I have this scorpionic undertone. And I think even in Vedic astrology, I'm a Scorpio. It's just really funny because I identify as a Sagittarian, but I'm seeing more and more how that Scorpio element is coming out, and how that might allow me to relate to people with this Scorpio element, because I have kind of like a moon in Scorpio, having the moon in conjunction with Pluto. And so some of you, if your moon is in conjunction with Pluto, if you have Pluto in Scorpio as well as the moon in Scorpio, watch out. So anyway, one thing I would say about this combination, watch out for manipulating other people. You may not do this in a consciously destructive kind of a way, or conniving kind of a way. You might be doing this just because it's an emotional default. But you have to be careful about doing that, because you might do it to get your needs met, or if you're doing it from the moon in Scorpio point of view, it might be because you're trying to test a partner, because Scorpio is one of those signs that I feel has trust issues. Maybe we could say that about all of the water signs. I don't really resonate with that with Cancer as much. in and of itself. But, obviously there are possibilities where, if you have the sun in conjunction with Pluto or something like that, you may have, or the sun in the 8th house, you may have a sun in the 12th house, you may have experiences that lead you to believe that people cannot be trusted, and therefore you might engage upon in certain activities that test people and see if they really are loyal to you, if they are going to leave. And, Cancer is associated with clinginess. So you don't want to push people away by smothering them with, excessive a need for engagement with people, even your significant other. We have to give other people space, and we can't believe that we own another person. Even if you're married, even if you have a contract called a marriage license or a wedding ring or any of that stuff, you do not own another person, and you have to allow them to make their own decisions. And if they choose to be with you, the more you can be light, not heavy, I was going to say light-handed instead of heavy-handed about it, the more I think you're going to master the art of the relationship. And by the way, relationship can include your children. Are you overprotective of your children? You might think that is showing love to your child, but it can be, when you overprotect a child, what you're teaching them on a very subtle level, which can be actually more insidious, is that the world is a dangerous place. And that can set them up for maybe anxiety, being overly cautious themselves, and that kind of thing. You don't want to do that. Or when they become teenagers, rebellious. You want to tune into your child. Every child is different, obviously. Some children are naturally anxious, and you could be, instead of kind of reinforcing their anxiety, you could be helping them to understand it and transcend it. But you may have your own anxieties. And again, trauma does tend to breed those kinds of things. So you have to get a handle on your emotions. And, there are different ways of doing so. If you feel like you can't do it on your own, if you can find a conscious therapist, a therapist that really is trying to help people on an energetic level, it could be a psychologist, maybe it's an energy healer who is really in tune with your energetic field, and they can sense like blockages, or some people like past life regression. And some of these things can be done in tandem. You don't have to pick one over the other. Because people with a lot of emotion can feel that they're drowning in it, and also that they can't see things clearly because they're very subjective. They can only see things from their point of view, and it makes it hard to step out of that and see things from a higher perspective. And sometimes an outer person can make sense of these things for you because they're not you. Love for you can be a bit of a loaded issue, because the moon in Scorpio has a hard time being open with their emotions. They tend to be very secretive. I was saying in another video that I had read that Pisces and Scorpio are secretive about their emotions. And I didn't see anything about Cancer, but in my experience, they can be so too. You can have a parent who's a water sign who doesn't tell their children much about their past. And it's like, why not? Did they have a difficult childhood? Well, that might be in part what's going on. The past may trigger unpleasant memories for them, and they don't want to be in that emotional state. But I think also, and I would say especially with Scorpio, it's the issue of control or power, which is very important to Scorpio, whether it be sun or moon, is that the person wants to have control over themselves. And if they are too open with their emotions, they're afraid that they will be used against them by that person at a future date, or that, like in kind of like during an argument, just throwing it back in somebody's face. And that there are people who do that, as well as using it in some other sort of covert way to damage that person's reputation or whatever. I don't know. Or even like to be able to get inside that person's head and be able to manipulate them better. And the Scorpio person, it's almost like, and I'm talking about the moon, maybe even more than the sun sometimes, it's almost like playing an eternal game of chess, like trying to anticipate another person's motives. I mean, that would be the height of paranoia, I guess. I don't know how else to put it, if somebody really thought like that. But yeah, just like, okay, how can I counter that person's possible move, and always being one step ahead of somebody else. And that's no way to live. The more that you're open, the more that you don't care what another person knows about you. And of course, there might be some things that people choose to keep to themselves, but I'm talking about in a general sort of way. If you can feel confident that you have nothing to hide, like that saying, you're only as sick as your secrets, then you don't have that fear that is creating that reality of yours. When we talk about creating our realities, I mean, fear can be the building blocks of some people creating their reality. And we don't want that. So the more open you are, the more another person can empathize with you. See, that is the, what do they call that? The catch-22. When you're not open, other people may not know what you've been through, and they may judge you kind of more on the surface. If you are the kind of person who is kind of difficult emotionally, maybe you do have, there's a hypersensitivity sometimes with Cancer that other people can kind of recoil from and say, oh gosh, I have to walk on eggshells around this individual. What is with them? They're so insecure, or they're so, everything is about them. They read into everything. If I make an innocent comment, they think it's a veiled reference to them. And that does happen, let's face it, with people who have a lot of water, is that they make things very personal, and that can, make their relationships not as good as they would like them to be. So the more you understand about yourself, the more that you're willing to risk being exposed, and the more that you can try to become less subjective and more objective, and get outside of that lens that you're seeing things from, I think you're going to be more consistently happy, and you're going to have relationships that are more consistently smooth running, instead of like the drama and that sort of thing, and the misunderstandings, and that creates drama too. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.